In this episode, you'll discover 3 ways to protect oars and sculls that prevent the paint wearing off and the spoon degrading.
Feel the grip of the oar handle, smooth yet firm in your hands. Taste the salt of your own sweat and the occasional splash of water. It's all part of the journey. Welcome to another episode of Faster Masters Rowing Radio. Each week, our host, Masters rowing coach Rebecca Caro, dives deep into the world of Masters rowing. Whether you're on the water or in the gym, join us to become a faster master. Let's go rowing.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's Faster Masters Rowing Radio, where we're talking about protecting your oars. Now, every club has the same challenge, which is that you maybe paint your oars in the club colours, and over time, the paint gets worn, but it only gets worn in certain places. It gets worn at the middle of the back of the oar, on the centre of the curve, where the oar brushes against the bank. And secondly, the tips of the blades get worn off at the corners, so you no longer have a sharp rectangular corner. So we're going to talk about things that I've found online, which are defensive protectors for oars. That's rather fancy. But the first one we found was from our own club. But I want to tell you first why we needed it. We boat from a pontoon, from a dock, and it's made of wood, and the surface of the wood gets greasy and somewhat slippy, particularly in the winter months where it's been raining. And despite us pressure spraying it with high pressure water hoses, we still had people, slipping. So the first thing we did was we put non-slip matting onto the dock, and the color we chose was black with white flecks, and it has tiny little circular holes in it, so water drains through it and then dissipates. But it has a textured surface that's, I suppose it's a little bit like sandpaper, but it's sort of bigger bobbles and wider space. And it's recommended for use in places like ski lodges, where obviously ice and snow are slippery surfaces. And it was really, really good. It was jolly expensive as well. But we had the downside of it was that it was an abrasive surface for our oars. Now, we've always had a rule in the club that when you push off from the dock and when you return and land back onto the dock, that you take your oar and you put the oar with the tip side down. So basically the oar's upside down when you land on the dock, because this bit on the back, this sort of central bit, is exactly where your paint tends to wear off and you get those wear patterns. So landing with tips down was great, but it meant we then had wear on the tips of the blade when we didn't have them on the backs of the blade. So the first things that we found as products that you might like to look at came from Croker Oars, and these are tip protectors, and they're little corners, just a little sort of triangle that you super glue onto the corners of the tips of the blade, so it goes on here and here. And it's just a little bit of plastic, but it's just enough so that the plastic takes the wear and not the tip of the carbon oar. The second thing that Concept 2 oar users might like to use is their Vortex Edge, which is a plastic shield. It's actually a strip that has a gap in the middle, and you slide it onto the tip of the blade and glue it on. And it has performance benefits, but actually it also has oar protection benefits. So you might want to consider getting those, because keeping on wearing the tip of the oar has 2 consequences. The first is obviously that you're reducing the surface area of your spoon, only by a little bit, but it is noticeable. But the second thing is the wear is always in the same direction. And I found with my personal sculls that I had worn the tip into quite a sharp point. Now, there is a legal minimum thickness of the oar, which is required by World Rowing, and that is 3 millimeters. And the very tips of my oars were definitely less than 3 millimeters, and that got spotted at a regatta. when my boat was being checked by the marshals before I went on the water. So we actually then had to sand down the tips of my blades to square off the sharp bit so that it was then a 3 millimeter. It met the minimum requirements. Now, the most recent thing that I've discovered is a scuff patch kit, where a protective decal, a piece of vinyl sticker, is something that you can then put onto the middle of the back of the oar for the exact place where the oar rubs against the dock. So if you tend to land and put your oars still the right way up, so the curved back of the oar is rubbing along the pontoon or the bank, this is another little defensive protector that you might like to look at. And the last one that is something that is definitely available in the USA, but I'm not sure that it's definitely available outside the world, is blade wraps. We've all seen cars that get wrapped in funky colors, but this is the same idea, but for rowing oars. So you can get them to print up your club colors, and then they cut them and design them to the shape of the oar. So you have to specify what type of oar they're going to go on, but you apply them with a heat gun, and then they cover the whole of both sides of the oar. And it's quicker probably than repainting your oars, but also it provides an element of protection, but it probably won't prevent, the sticker being worn off over time if you do land with your oars the right way up. So having said all of that, look after your oars, and they'll last a little bit longer. I will say that the days of painting oars, we used to go and get spray can paint for car touching up paint, and that was pretty good. But I'm actually an advocate of old-fashioned marine grade gloss paint, sanding it down, priming it, undercoat, top coat. Now, it depends on the complexity of your oar design, and there are clubs I know that have very complex like logos and sort of shields and things that may not be appropriate for them. You might have to have a decal, and increasingly there are clubs who do not paint their oars, which I will say is not great at regattas. We don't paint our oars, and so we had to have a whole load of stickers made to go on the shaft so that we could identify the oars that were ours, because there's always somebody who leaves a pair of oars and forgets to pick it up after their race, and then suddenly you're down a pair of sculls and you wonder where on earth it went. So I hope that that's useful, and that when I publish this, I will put all of those links into the show notes so that you can go and find your own oar protection. Till next time.
We are part of the Rowing Chat Podcast Network. Please tell your fellow rowers about the show. If you've learned just one helpful thing from today's episode, please consider supporting the show for as little as $1 per month by visiting fastermastersrowing.com/podcast.